There's a good chance a small bottle of vitamin D sits somewhere in your house right now, on a kitchen shelf, in a pill box, prescribed after a routine blood test. Most of us take it without asking why our bodies suddenly need help doing something they used to do on their own. Maybe you've noticed it in your own family too. One grandparent who tanned easily and spent a lifetime outdoors without a burn. Another who reddened after 20 minutes and reached for a hat every summer. We rarely think of that difference as anything more than a family quirk, something to laugh about at a reunion, not something to investigate. But it's actually the tail end of one of the longest-running experiments evolution has ever run on our species, still quietly playing out in every family photo album. The answer to why your body needs that little bottle starts almost 300,000 years ago, on a continent none of us have ever set foot on, and it ends with the exact shade of skin you're looking at on your own hand today. We tend to think of skin as packaging, the wrapping our organs came in. But skin is an organ in its own right, the largest one we have, and it runs dozens of jobs at once without ever asking for a break. One of its oldest jobs, older than clothing, older than sunscreen, older than roofs over our heads, is managing sunlight. The pigment behind skin color is melanin, and at its core, melanin is a built-in sunscreen. The more of it your skin produces, the darker it appears, and the more effectively it blocks ultraviolet radiation from reaching the DNA sitting in your skin cells. UV doesn't just tan you. It breaks chemical bonds and damages DNA directly, and enough accumulated damage becomes cancer. In equatorial Africa, where our species began, sunlight is relentless nearly every day of the year. Under that kind of exposure, natural selection had a simple, non-negotiable answer. More melanin, better protection, longer life, more chances to pass on your genes. Dark skin wasn't a variation there. It was the baseline every one of us started from. Here's the part fewer people know. UV radiation doesn't just threaten skin cells. It also breaks down a molecule called folate, a form of vitamin B9 that circulates in the bloodstream. Folate is essential for the earliest development of an embryo's neural tube, the structure that becomes the brain and spinal cord. Without enough of it in the first weeks of pregnancy, often before a woman even knows she's pregnant, that structure can fail to close properly, with devastating consequences. In an environment with constant, intense sun exposure, lighter skin meant more of reaching the bloodstream, meant more folate destroyed, meant a higher risk to pregnancies. So dark skin in Africa wasn't protecting one thing, it was protecting two: the DNA in every cell, and the earliest moments of the next generation. Beginning roughly 70,000 to 100,000 years ago, groups of early humans began drifting out of Africa, not in one dramatic exodus, but generation by generation, family by family, moving a little further than their parents had. As they spread into the Middle East, Europe, and Asia, something about their environment quietly shifted. The sun itself hadn't changed, but at higher latitudes, its light travels through more atmosphere and hits the ground at a shallower angle. Winters grew longer and darker. The intense radiation that once needed blocking became a scarce resource that now needed absorbing. This is where the story stops being about the distant past and starts being about the people watching this right now. Vitamin D is synthesized in the skin. When UVB light hits a compound just under the surface, your skin, quite literally, works like a small solar panel. And vitamin D isn't optional. It governs how your gut absorbs calcium and phosphorus. Without it, calcium intake barely matters because the body can't use it properly. In children, severe deficiency causes rickets, softened, bowed bones. But the story doesn't end in childhood. In adults, and especially after middle age, low vitamin D is tied to weaker bone density, higher fracture risk, and, for many women after menopause, a faster slide toward osteoporosis. It also plays a role in immune function and muscle strength, which is part of why so many of us are handed a small bottle of it well into our 40s, 50s, 60s. So, when a dark-skinned population moved into a gray, low-sun environment 40,000 years ago, their highly efficient melanin, brilliant in Africa, became a liability. It blocked the very light their bodies now desperately needed. Vitamin D synthesis dropped. Bones weakened. Childbirth became more dangerous for mothers with softened pelvic bones. And evolution, which doesn't care about the past, only about what works now, began quietly favoring anyone whose skin let a little more light through. For a long time, scientists assumed this lightening happened slowly and steadily, in step with the migration itself. Ancient DNA research has since told a more surprising story. Analysis of skeletal remains found in Britain, dated to roughly 10,000 years ago, showed an individual with dark to medium dark skin, someone who had lived at a northern latitude for thousands of years without dramatically depigmenting. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't move at the pace we imagine. Sometimes it waits, and then it moves fast. So what pressed the accelerator? Roughly 6,000 to 8,000 years ago, a sliver of time in a 300,000-year story, humans shifted from hunting and gathering to farming. Hunter-gatherer diets naturally included vitamin D-rich foods, fatty fish, organ meats, shellfish. Farming diets leaned heavily on grains, and dietary vitamin D intake collapsed almost overnight in evolutionary terms. Suddenly, skin had to do nearly all the work the diet used to share. At the same time, farming communities were larger and denser than scattered hunter-gatherer bands, and a helpful mutation spreads through a large, connected population far faster than through a small, scattered one. Diet collapse plus population density turned a slow-burning trend into a rapid one, and it shows clearly in the archaeological and genetic record. Something that surprises most people: there is no single light-skin gene or dark-skin gene. Skin color is polygenic, shaped by dozens of genes working together. And here's the part that still gives researchers pause. East Asian and European populations both evolved lighter skin independently, but largely through different sets of genetic variants. Two separate populations, on two separate continents, arrived at a similar biological answer through different molecular paths, a pattern scientists call convergent evolution. When nature finds the same solution more than once, through different routes, it's usually a sign that the pressure behind it was very real. Step back, and the full picture becomes clear. Skin color isn't a ranking system, and never was. It's a UV calibration setting, your body's ancestral best guess about how much sun protection versus sun absorption it needs, based on where your distant ancestors happen to live, what they happen to eat, and how much light reached them. Neither shade is more evolved. Dark skin is our shared starting point as a species. Every lighter variation is simply a more recent adjustment layered on top of it. And the story isn't finished. We've changed the inputs: supplements, sunscreen, fortified food, indoor living, but the underlying process hasn't stopped. It's just running quieter than it used to. Which raises a question worth sitting with, especially for those of us who've lived long enough to watch our own bodies change. If our ancestors' environment could rewrite something as visible as skin color over a few thousand generations, what is our environment? Today's light, today's diet, today's habits, quietly writing into the bodies of the generations coming after us.